In this class, we look at writing to analyze, uh, responding to text briefly again in the context of writing to analyze. We have an in-class discussion on challenging your reading. A look at citations. We look at citations more in detail in the next class. This is the penultimate class of Unit 2, and next class will be the last class of Unit 2. And then there is peer response. So when you write to analyze, the first thing that you look at is the text, of course, which you're analyzing. In this case, your text is Susan Sontag's essay. Your immediate context is the essay itself. You look at who the writer is, which is Sontag. Look at yourself as the reader, and who else is the potential audience for a text like this, and what is the subject. In this case, it's war photography. So it's Sontag, an academic audience, and war photography. That's your immediate context. When you write to analyze, keep this immediate context in mind and make sure that your writing, or when you revise, that your writing reflects this immediate context of Sontag's. You can keep Sontag in context by making sure you quote her, and that you incorporate quotations from the text. Keep the reader in your writing by making sure that you keep putting in your perspective, and keep the subject in context by making sure you analyze the concept of war photography. So it's citations for the writer, personal experiences or personal thoughts for the reader, and analysis of war photography or one of the themes in war photography. That's how you keep your immediate context alive in your writing. And you can present all of this through analysis and summary. Now you have a broader context apart from your immediate context. Two things come under the broader context. One is your timing, and the other is your influences. What was the timing of the release of the essay? When was this essay released? You don't need to really write to them, but keeping them in mind will really help you aid your analysis and aid your own perspective. So for instance, if was this essay released around 9/11, it was definitely released shortly after 9/11. What are the sort of influences what sort of influences were there on the author that led her into writing this essay? So these are some broader contexts. You need to keep those in mind when you're actually when you're revising your essay, when you're writing your essay, the revised draft of your essay, because even if you don't actually talk to them, keeping them in mind, you'll see, will subtly have an influence in presenting the reader perspective or your own perspective, or even when you're doing an analysis on the subject. Ideally, your introduction should contain the presence of your broader context, so you can present your own perspective, and your perspective can incorporate timing and influence, and that should be the introduction. The major part of the text should be the analysis and the summary, and also, which would also of course include quotations from the text. So that should come in the body of your text, of your essay. So the finished essay should have, the final essay, the final draft should have your perspective and strong signs of revision, where the essay has improved from one draft to the other. So right away, when I say the introduction should have the broader context, what I mean really is that clearly state your perspective on what you think about war photography. You can do it in the section that talks about, you can write your own introduction, or you can do it in the section that talks about the personal photo, but your understanding of the essay, or the approach you've used to actually discuss the essay, which theme you're discussing, and your perspective on that specific theme should be very clear in your introduction. And then supporting it with experiences, with quotes from the essay, with anecdotal narratives. Maybe somebody has told you about war photographs, or you've talked to war veterans. So all of that can come in your support, where you're supporting your claim, and that can be present in the body. I would recommend pausing the slide and just looking at it in terms of how to organize your essay, and then you can keep that in mind when you're revising your essay, especially the second section of your essay. When you talk about supporting your perspective with experiences, you can do that. We looked at these different methods of responding to text. So your perspective can be to agree, disagree, to reflect, to engage in a conversation with the author, to extend or to temper or to perform a rhetorical analysis of what the author has said. So we looked in detail at different methods to respond to text. So when you present your perspective, use one of these one of these approaches to present your perspective, because your perspective is essentially a response to the text, right? Either you're agreeing with what the author is saying, you're extending, or you're pointing out a strength. So your perspective primarily is to respond to what Sontag has said, or to respond to a specific theme that Sontag has used in her essay. And what you do after that is to further, when you extend, then you use so the left hand side would be in your introduction, and the right hand side, where you talk about proving your perspective, actually comes in the body. So it's fairly simple. Your perspective, which is presented in the introduction, will be like one of these, where you clearly say how you're choosing to respond to the text, and you expand on how you're choosing to respond to the text using experiences, anecdotal narratives, or quotes from the essay, or a combination of all of that. And that's done using one of these methods on the right hand side, depending on which method you've chosen to respond to the text and present your perspective. So that sort of brings everything together, both responding to the text from last week and writing to analyze, which you also did as homework, reading from the Penguin Handbook, Chapter 6. So this is the in-class discussion. This will be there under Week 5, Class 1, as Week 5, Class 1 discussion. So what you need to do is to select a paragraph that you found particularly difficult. Sontag's essay is dense. It is not one of the easier reads. So I'm sure there have been places where you had to pause, step back, and read the paragraph again to understand what she's really saying. It's full of subtext. Sontag's essay has implied meanings throughout. It's not just what she's saying. There's a lot that she does not say that you sort of deduce by looking at the way she's arranged her text. So look at one paragraph that you found particularly difficult, examine it, write a sentence explaining why you found it difficult. Is it the language? Is it the manner in which the ideas have been presented? Or is it your own past assumptions that conflict with what the author has to say? Once you finish the examine step, move on to the second step, where you describe your reading process. Are there other similarities in the areas that you found difficult? Like maybe you did find another section difficult, but is this section that you found difficult similar to other difficulties you faced, not just in Sontag's, but maybe other difficulties you faced in other essays? So what is the similarity between the difficulty you faced here and the difficulty you faced elsewhere? And what effect did the difficult sections have? So you pointed out a paragraph that you found difficult to read. How did it impact the meaning that you made of the essay? So were you able to not understand? Did you have to read a second time to make meaning? So just describe your whole reading process. Sorry, it's not 2 paragraphs. So reread that one particular paragraph aloud again. So you've examined your difficulty, you've articulated your difficulty, you've described your reading process. Now keep that in mind and reread this paragraph. Reread the paragraph, and how has your understanding of the essay changed after you worked through your difficulty, and what is the author trying to say? So on the second reading, after you've done this examination and after you've described the reading process, was reading that particular paragraph a little easier, and what made it easier? Or if it did not change, you can say, well, it's still equally difficult. But that's the first. But then also talk about what is the author trying to say over here. We look at incorporating sources more in detail next week, but as you work towards your revision, something that you need to keep in mind is sources are primarily used to substantiate the claim you've made, or to build arguments, either to agree, disagree, or do a little bit of both. So you can quote directly, very inline quotes with block quotes, and make sure you use quotation marks. If you're using text directly from your essay, it's very important that you use quotation marks and give the author the credit. Otherwise, it's potential copyright infringement, and we don't want to do that. So make sure you quote using the quotation marks, and use at least 4 to 5 quotes throughout your essay and 1 block quote. A block quote is 4 lines or more. Less than 4 lines is in-text citation. You can look at the Penguin Handbook to see how both these texts are presented differently. Look at your Penguin Handbook on the in the MLA section, and they clearly talk about how you need to present in-text citations and how you need to present block citations. We will also look at that more in detail in the next class. If the original wording is not important, it's alright to paraphrase or summarize what the author is trying to say. But it's also important that if you're paraphrasing or summarizing, you don't use words directly from the source. That's of utmost importance. If you're using 3 or more words directly from the source, then you need to make it a quote. But if you feel like you want to paraphrase it, replace those words with synonyms or structure your sentence differently. The sentence structure, not the word, should be similar to the original text if you're paraphrasing or summarizing. Finally, attribute quotations before you introduce them. So according to Sontag, then quote unquote, or you can say Sontag says and then summarize, but make sure you attribute the quotation before you introduce them. And if you're having quotations, you need to also produce the page number. So we have read pages 59 to 74, essay number 5 for unit 2's essay. So if you are using specific quotes, make sure you put page numbers at the end of the quote. So you start off saying Sontag, use the quote, end it with page numbers. And again, we look at this in detail. This is just to make sure you have this in the back of your mind as you approach your revision. Look at the section on incorporating sources. This will be under the MLA section. Not mandatory, I'd recommend it. You can also do it after we finish next class. In terms of peer response, the due date, the process that you follow for peer response is exactly the same as what we did last time. You need to read the essay and give your feedback. It's due by end of day 6th of July 2012 EST. Just want to make sure we're clear on the deadline. So it's 6th of July, end of day. Please email your essay to your peer in a Word doc if you haven't already done so. And the peers, as you're sending your feedback via email, make sure you copy me on your response. So send them your feedback, but make sure you copy me on your response. I'm going to upload a document in a week 5 called Peer Response Best Practices. There are 3-4 specific questions. If you answer them, that's the best way to produce peer response. I'd recommend looking at that before you send out your peer response.